The Carolina Panthers are entering a pivotal offseason in 2024, and without getting an elite wide receiver one, I believe will be a failure regardless of what other moves the team makes. They're coming off of one of the worst seasons in franchise history, and in a year with so much hope and promise before it began, it was truly a massive disappointment. I personally know a handful of Panther fans, and the expectation heading into the season was to be a playoff team. After falling one game short of the division title in 2022 with Sam Darnold starting most of the season, the thought was getting a really good quarterback prospect with the #1 overall pick would be enough to get into the postseason. The Panthers also decided to hire longtime coach Frank Reich, an entirely new coaching staff, and that was also seen as a positive, contrary to the staff Matt Rule had a year prior. But as we know, that was not the case, and it became pretty clear early on the Panthers were going to be one of the worst teams in the league. They started off 0-6 with their first win coming in late October against the Houston Texans, and finished out the year 1-9, ending up with the first overall pick in the draft, which most times having a season like that with a rookie quarterback, you can still find a silver lining because you'd have the top pick in the draft to continue to build around them. But in this super unique case for the Panthers, they don't actually own the pick due to the Bryce Young trade with the Chicago Bears, and that's what's going to make this offseason so difficult for new general manager Dan Morgan. With that said though, I do like how the Panthers have started this offseason. I like the direction of the organization, getting a respected former player who I think has a good sense of what to do as the new lead man in charge. New head coach Dave Canales might end up being the best offensive mind hired this coaching cycle, as Ben Johnson and Bobby Slowick both went back to their respective teams, which seems crazy to say due to the negative aura surrounding this Panthers franchise earlier this offseason due to owner David Tepper. So not many people expected the Panthers to get a legit head coach, but Canales at 42 years old did an awesome job with Baker Mayfield and the Buccaneers last year. I remember preseason many were talking about the Buccaneers being one of the worst teams in football and how Baker might lose the quarterback competition to Kyle Trask. Instead, they went on to win a playoff game, and Baker Mayfield had the best season of his career. And I think another important thing that Canales can bring is a fresh set of energy that the building needs. Frank Reich is a pretty calm, relaxed guy. He doesn't show a lot of emotion, and for a young team like the Panthers, you kind of want a coach that has that fiery energy to rally behind, and Canales has that. He's from the Pete Carroll tree. He worked under him for over a decade on both USC's and the Seattle Seahawks staff. So that is definitely a positive trait that he has picked up. But at the end of the day, the #1 thing on his job description, and really the thing that will determine his success as a head coach, is if he can develop Bryce Young, and if so, how much. I don't want to sound like a broken record, but if you have been following the channel for a minute, my opinion on Bryce Young has been well stated even before last year's draft. I believe the Panthers should have taken CJ Stroud, and it was not a good idea to take the smallest quarterback in recent memory that doesn't have a lot of elite traits, #1 overall, while hoping for a historic outlier. I didn't think that was smart business, and after one season, it sure does look like CJ Stroud was the quarterback who should have gone with the first pick, and that Bryce Young has some serious limitations as a player. Now, obviously, last season was not all of his fault. I will get into that a bit more, but I also don't think you can chalk up Young's rookie season as something that wasn't concerning. The fears that many had, including myself, about him at the next level really showed themselves. The lack of arm strength to stretch the field and throw outside of the numbers consistently, his playmaking ability against bigger, faster, and stronger athletes, and his ability to truly carry an offense. I think for me, the biggest thing I wanted to see was how his athleticism carried over, and if he was still going to be able to run around behind the line of scrimmage, juke out 3 defenders, and launch a bomb down the field, kind of what Kyler Murray does for the Cardinals. But as I stated in my scouting video of Young, I didn't think that he had the level of escapability to really be elite at that in the NFL. And while he was efficient at picking up some first downs here and there with his legs last season, I don't think Bryce is the type of playmaker many saw at Alabama. So if Bryce is not going to be a prime Russell Wilson or Kyler Murray, what are fair expectations for him? I think Bryce compared super nicely to another Alabama quarterback who plays for a team in South Florida that goes by the name of Tua Tagovailoa. Another smaller quarterback with not great arm strength or mobility, but shares a lot of the same really good traits that Bryce has: anticipation, accuracy, ability to throw over the middle of the field, and good movement within the pocket. I think what the Miami Dolphins built with Mike McDaniel, Tyreek Hill, and Jalen Waddle is precisely what the Panthers need to try and replicate to see Bryce Young reach his ceiling. Although I don't see Tua or Bryce reaching the level of quarterback that carries offenses and being top 5 in the league, they can both be above average starters and fit in that Kirk Cousins, Dak Prescott, Jared Goff type of tier, and there's really no shame in that. The only issue with that type of quarterback leading your team is you usually don't want to pay that guy like a top-end quarterback, because then you can't surround him with the requisite weaponry that they need to compete with some of the other elite guys. We see that now with the Dolphins if they really should pay a Tua or not. With Bryce, of course, only entering year #2, has some time before that becomes a real debate. And I do think Bryce is more athletic than Tua, and due to not having injury concerns, is a lot more willing to stand in the pocket and take hits. So in the end, his ceiling might be a little bit higher. But what you see with Tua and the offense he runs in Miami, I think it's a great blueprint on how the Panthers organization should build their offense around Bryce this offseason. So they've already got their new offensive mind to cater a system around their talent. But now in terms of actually getting that talent, who will the Panthers target and how will they acquire them in the next couple of months? They currently have $42 million in cap room, but have some big decisions to make in terms of their own rostered players. 3 of their best defensive players, Brian Burns, Frankie Louvu, and Derek Brown, are all either set to become free agents or entering the last year of their deal. Signing all 3 to potential long-term contracts will allow the team to spread out the money over the next several seasons, providing more flexibility for 2024. On top of those potential extensions, there also may be some cap casualties. Dante Jackson, Ian Thomas, or even Terrence Marshall Jr. could be some players that Dan Morgan decides to release. And then players like Taylor Moton and 2 of the team's big signings from a year ago, and Miles Sanders and Hayden Hurst, could also be approached about contract restructures. So there is a chance the Panthers could have around $60 million to work with in free agency, and practically every dime I spend this offseason, if I'm Dan Morgan and Dave Canales, is on the offensive side of the ball. Most of the current talent is on defense. They also ranked 3rd in the NFL in yards per game last year, which I think reflects that. And in such a big year for Bryce Young's development, I'm spending almost all of my resources to get him some help. The first area that could use some improvement is the offensive line, which was ranked 23rd in the league in terms of pass block win rate. I do think there are some pieces to work with. Taylor Moton is a solid option at right tackle. Akim Ekwonu was a top 6 pick in 2022, although he did struggle last season with 12 penalties and 11 sacks allowed. I think ultimately the Panthers might end up moving him to guard, as that fits his skill set a little bit better in my opinion. But Brady Christensen, Bradley Bozeman, and Austin Corbett are okay starters on the inside as well. But maybe moving one of them to be a backup, sliding in Ekwonu at guard, and signing a veteran tackle like Trent Brown or Jonah Williams could be a potential solution to improve the line. Or of course, spending a 2nd or 3rd round pick on the best lineman available is another option to get another potential good starter. But by far, the most important thing the Panthers have to acquire this offseason is some new skill position players. You could argue last season that Adam Thielen, DJ Chark, and Jonathan Mingo was the worst trio of wide receivers in the league. They didn't separate well, they couldn't make tough catches in traffic, and for a young quarterback, that tends to be a recipe for disaster. So the Panthers have to find a bona fide wide receiver 1 this offseason, and luckily for them, there's 3 in the market that will instantly take this offense to the next level. Those being T. Higgins, Mike Evans, and Michael Pittman Jr. Higgins would be my favorite fit, but also the most expensive. He just got franchise tagged by the Bengals, and it's unknown currently if they're going to field trade offers around him, but I'm personally at the mindset that they will end up doing so. So the Panthers would likely have to trade a 2nd and 4th round pick, as well as pay $20+ million a season to acquire him, which is a bit steep due to the lack of draft capital Carolina has. But getting a talent like Higgins for this offense, I think, would make it worth it. But if not Higgins, Evans and Pittman are 2 other fantastic options hitting the market. Evans is coming off of his 10th straight 1,000-yard season and might be looking to cash in for the last time in his career. The Buccaneers have a lot of pending free agents and might not be able to pay him top of the market money. The wild card surrounding the situation, though, is if Evans decides he wants to play for a contender like the Kansas City Chiefs and take less money. But if he is set on becoming one of the highest paid wide receivers, I think Carolina will be right in the thick of things with their cap room and having his former offensive coordinator now as their head coach. But if they strike out on Higgins and they strike out on Evans, then there's Michael Pittman Jr., who might actually be the best of both worlds in terms of price to get him and his age only being 26 years old. He had over 1,100 yards with Gardner Minshew last season, and I don't think he's hit his ceiling yet. In an offense where he would be the vocal point, I think he can be a true X wide receiver. But the Panthers have to sign one of those top-end targets, or their free agency is a massive disappointment in my eyes. Theoretically, Carolina could wait on a wide receiver and draft one with their 2nd round selection, but if that's the case, they're likely going to get the 5th or 6th wide receiver off the board, and someone you don't know if they can play right away and be effective. I mean, we saw that last season with their other 2nd round pick, Jonathan Mingo. So I think at this point, they have enough guys who can do specific roles on the offense and a developmental guy in Mingo. What's missing is a proven commodity. So I believe the Panthers have to do whatever it takes to get one of those guys if they want to see some development out of Bryce Young. You go to the backfield with Hubbard and Sanders, and I think they're more than capable to be the tandem again in 2024. With how the value of running backs has depreciated and where you can find these guys in the draft, I wouldn't mind the Panthers spending a day 3 pick on one of them, but the focus for me is really on the outside, and I think that's really where the Panthers should spend most of their resources. But that's really what I see as the key to the Panthers offseason, what they must achieve if they want to see steps of improvement next season. I want to know what you think about the Panthers and what you think their top priorities should be. Do you agree with me and think they need to get more weaponry for Bryce Young right away? today? Or do you think the offensive line is the most important thing needing upgrades? Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. But subscribe to the channel if you are new, drop a like on the video if you did enjoy it, and as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in my next one.